coming from the funeral home itself, Damon.
Correct. And I suppose it's just an extension of what we do here. We had, over the years, I suppose, developed big time the live stream from the funeral home, which we developed years ago. I think over 20 years ago, we broadcast live first. If a family have somebody out foreign and they can't make it to the funeral, so we could broadcast the funeral to them. Of course, then when the COVID came in, this became a huge area that everything had to be live streamed, I suppose, more or less. And this is probably just moving on from that. We have our own YouTube site where we put our funerals, and people can see, say, funeral masses or whatever afterwards. So I just saw that different people had podcasts, and they said, I wonder what a podcast that would be kind of, it's funeral related, I suppose, really, because we're talking about all things funeral mostly, and I think people sit down with us and we have a cup of coffee and we have a chat, and sometimes they don't even realize the cameras are rolling, and we have a chat and they talk about things that they experienced during the funeral, things that were good for them, things that weren't so good for them. And I think that's something that people are interested in, and it's an education for us because we know the next time we have a funeral, don't do that. That we might do
Yeah,
something that.
and how you handle it is fantastic,
Oh,
if you
thanks.
don't mind my saying
Thank
so.
you.
And,
Thank
and
you.
it obviously comes from the empathy that you would have naturally, but also from years of experience of dealing with bereaved families, I suppose.
Correct. And I suppose one of big advantages that we have here is well, an advantage and a disadvantage is that we know personally the people that we're dealing with. So we're able to
Yeah.
meet them afterwards and, have a chat with them, and they can tell us exactly that, like what they liked and what they didn't like. And if we did something that upset them, they could say it to us so we could make sure that we don't do it the next time. And if we did something that, kept them a little bit of kind of comfort, then we know, God, we must do that the next time. And it can be even a small little thing, something simple they might just say to us, you should have tissues underneath the seats, or, if you give us a glass of water halfway through the reposing would have helped us big time. So they're small little things, but they make a huge difference to a family. And I suppose for us, then I kind of felt that if I got into this podcast, that families would see some of the people that they don't generally meet. Like the guy who delivers coffins to us now the other day, he sat down and we had a great chat. And it was probably only about 10 minutes long, but like he's delivering coffins here for 45 years. And people would never see him. And I'd say to someone, I don't have that particular coffin, but I get it for you, and Pat will bring it up. And to them, like Pat just runs over their head. He's somebody they don't know. But to us, like
Yeah,
45 years delivering coffins, he's like a family member.
yeah, and you see, people might think, "Oh God, no, a podcast from a funeral home, it's going to be all sorts of sad and miserable and stuff." But quite the opposite, because I was looking at the piece you did with our good friend Joe Noble. There's a lot of laughs in there. There's a lot
Correct.
of nostalgia in there as well. And one thing that really struck me was that you presented her with where, because he has everything organized with you for her
Correct.
own demise, but you told her this is where you will be, Joe. You know?
And of course, she was fierce, anxious to see that, to see all the different aspects of the funeral home. I suppose a lot
Yeah.
of people don't get to see that because you come in the front door, you meet the family, you sympathize, you might stand around for a few minutes and then go out the front door. So you don't maybe see a lot of stuff that goes on here. So I thought the podcast, it kind of shows people that there's other things that go on here, and maybe the human side behind it all.
Yeah.
And of course, Joe did
It,
is
it,
such a character.
good stuff. Because we'll be talking to her, in fact, in a little while. But what reaction are you getting to the podcasting or the video casting as it is?
And it's getting good reaction now. And what I'd notice, Fran, if you're talking to, say, a stranger in a family, for argument's sake, if we're doing a funeral for a family here and have somebody who comes a distance to the funeral, and they'll sit down and have a chat with you, and you'll know by talking to them that they've actually watched the podcast. Because you know the way they're talking about different aspects of the funeral home and different things that go on in the funeral home. You know in your heart and soul they actually watched, they watched the podcast, and that's where they got that information. So I suppose it is kind of letting people know kind of what
And
more things that go on here and meeting.
are
Sorry.
you finding more and more that people like what you those case? I mean, where they are coming to before personalized, before they pass away, and they're making all the arrangements with you, and in some cases, in fact, even paying you ahead of time.
Correct. And some people like to do that. They like to have everything organized, and I can understand where they're coming from. And they just want. And I've always said to people, even if you're just talking to a family, sitting down having your meal, if you just say to the family, "Look, I want to be buried with my mum and dad, or I want to be cremated." So if something happens to you, especially if it's something sudden, then at least your family know they're doing the right thing. Whereas if
Yeah.
it's, if it's kind of somebody who's been sick for a while, they'll have said what they wanted. But if it comes sudden, you'd say, God, I don't know whether to cremate them, or I don't know whether to bury them, I don't know what to do. So, if you kind of spoken about it, and even, there was somebody not that long ago, who just met me coming out of one of the shops in town maybe a couple of months ago and just mentioned that he wanted to be cremated. And he did pass away suddenly. So the family knew. Then, they said, remember, he said to you a few months ago he wants to be cremated. So, other than that, they would have actually buried him. So something like that, I suppose, to let a family know what you want is very important. And some people then would like to have it sorted. Sorry,
And
Fran.
you would have seen both sides of this, I guess. I mean, you would have also seen the confusion, I suppose, around somebody who passes away, and a family isn't sure what the person would have wanted.
Correct. And I know, for argument's sake, in some instances, you say, look, we'll automatically bury them with their husband or their wife. But, if they've said that they wanted to be cremated, for argument's sake, at least you know then that you're doing the right thing. And I think no matter what somebody looks for, as long as the family know that they're doing what that person wanted, then I think it's a brilliant.
Yeah, there's more and more programs. I mean, like your own case with your own podcast, the video cast. There, I see on Netflix there's a program as well that I think an undertaker and his family
Yeah,
business over the years and talking about the way things have changed. And there's a lot on Sky about this as well. Um, is it opening up more? Are people willing to have more conversations around death now and how death is dealt with?
I think definitely. Before it was probably very taboo, but I suppose now people are far more willing to talk about it, and it's probably handled in a different manner. And again, even through one of the podcasts, I remember talking to one guy and I said, the system that we have here that, he talked about the way he was happy that, the way the person was laid out and they knew that I had my work done and they were involved, they were organising everything and they picked out the coffin. That they were, I suppose families are very involved and they're
Yeah.
far more willing to talk about stuff. And also I noticed of latter years that a funeral now kind of, I suppose it's a victim of COVID, but it has, years ago people just filed through the funeral home. Whereas now you'd find that they stand around talking more and they chat and which is very good for a family because they need to hear all those stories that the things that the person did, whatever the case may be.
In the past, and it's all up until now, I suppose, we tend to funerals happen pretty quickly in this country by comparison to other countries. But is that changing?
It is definitely people are more inclined to sit back and maybe I often hear them say they take what they call this day out.
Yes.
Which it's great because I think it gives us a chance to get our work done. It gives the gravediggers a chance. It gives the priest a chance to put his work together. It gives everybody great space. And I think a family are better able to, for argument's sake, if somebody passes away today, they might maybe have prayers tomorrow evening and the following evening then have the repose and the following morning maybe have their burial or cremation. But I think that period of time gives them great time to adjust and to, plan what they want to do properly and not, years ago, I suppose the person maybe might have passed away, maybe for argument's sake on a Tuesday in a hospital in Dublin. And the following evening they were in the church in Templemore and the following morning they were buried. So families didn't have any time with the person and they had no time to talk to people or chat and it was very rushed.
You have a wonderful facility there. Are you finding that more and more people then are also taking a non-religious
Yeah,
approach to their funerals, and maybe with somebody who's just conducting a kind of a, how even would you call it, a service at this point? But are
yeah.
you finding that?
And I suppose we still call it a service. And even when we're dealing with a family, we often say to them, if you want to come in tomorrow evening and say prayers. But what we really mean is come in and see the person, which I think is very therapeutic for them. It's part of the grieving process. And I notice a lot of the prepaid funerals, people who are prepaying obviously their funerals and they're leaving their instructions, the vast majority of them would not have any church involvement, that they would just have maybe reposing here and cremation service here the following day. And that seems to be a big trend.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, with all your experience of dealing with death and funerals and stuff, have you come to any conclusion
Well, after that,
about life, I suppose, and death over those years, Eamon?
no, I suppose death, I suppose, is a natural part of our family. I suppose is part of our house, is part of our home.
Yeah,
And we've had a couple of bereavements ourselves. In the last year or so, we've had
sure.
two great friends and two uncles. And when it does hit your own doorstep, and people often say to you, like, how do you deal with it every day? And I constantly say to them, when it's not somebody belong to yourself, it's a big difference. But when it is somebody belong to yourself, it does cast a different kind of a. I suppose your attitude is different, and you're then feeling what the people that come into you are feeling. You're feeling hurt and upset. Um, and I think,
Very,
and I
very
think, Fran,
interesting. If people, yeah, sorry,
sorry,
Eamon,
Fran, I
yeah.
think it actually helps us then in our daily work because the next time a family come in, we obviously know better what they're talking about. where
Of course.
you can see pain in other people's eyes then, where maybe you couldn't before because you hadn't experienced that.
Or that people want to access the podcast or the video cast or however you want to describe it. What's the best way to do that?
You can go into our website, of course, which is ejgray.com, and you'll find it there. But also, of course, if you just go into YouTube and put Gray's Funeral Home into it, it comes up, generally speaking, on it. You can find it very easily there.
All right. Well, Eamonn, pleasure to talk to you as always,
You
and
too,
look
Frank.
after yourself. And thank you for that, and congratulations to you as well. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Frank.
That is funeral director Eamonn Gray there from Gray's Funeral Home in Templemore. Recently started these up. Now it's not just a podcast because you can see it as well. So I don't know when you describe it as a video cast. And anyway, he had on as a guest our own Joe Noel. I was speaking to Joe and just Tip FM.